I'm not even entirely sure if this is the right place for this, but I can't think of anywhere else that I'd rather share it. I really want to talk about it, but I can't with anyone I know because of someone else's wishes. When I was about 11, I had a steady babysitter named Jane. My brother and sister were 17 and 18, so they were either too cool to babysit me or busy with school around this time. Jane was their age, but I don't think her family had a lot of money, so she would babysit me almost every weekend instead of doing normal teenager stuff. My family lived in a pretty well-to-do cul-de-sac in the back of a large neighborhood. It was one of those neighborhoods where the houses got nicer the further back you went. The houses at the front of the development, by the main road, weren't as nice, although still not terrible or anything. Right outside of there is where Jane lived. Since I was 11 and prepubescent, I was a huge pain in the ass. But not to Jane. I looked at her as a best friend. We did so many fun things together, and I could truly tell that Jane loved me. One Saturday night, my mom was making plans for the next week. But for one of the first times that I could remember, Jane couldn't babysit. She had her prom. She was very excited because the boy she had had a crush on for years asked her out. I knew this because she had been telling me about him since she started high school. My mother and I were both very excited for her, and I saw my mom hand her way more money than usual. Jane's eyes teared up, and she gave us both a giant hug before leaving. Since this was the mid-90s, everyone got babysitters from word of mouth. My mom heard from another mother in the neighborhood that a girl that used to babysit for her kids had just moved back to her parents' house after grad school. She lived down the street from Jane. Her name was Becky, and my mom called her up to see if she could babysit me that Saturday night. Becky excitedly said yes and proceeded to ask my mom some somewhat strange questions. How tall I was, what I looked like, what color my hair was. There might have been other questions asked, but I was just hearing my mom's side of the conversation. When she hung up the phone, my mom turned and said to my dad, "Wow, she sure is thorough." I was a little nervous, as Jane had been the only one to babysit me for years. In the rare instances that she couldn't do it, my parents usually just canceled their plans. But this was a work party coming up, and my dad was being honored, so that wasn't exactly an option. A couple days before Becky was to come, I begged my mom to call Jane. I wanted to see if I could come over the night of prom and see her in her dress. My mom kept telling me that she wouldn't want me there and that I could just see pictures later, but I insisted. So my mom called Jane and handed the phone to me. "Hey there, May. How are you?" "I'm good. I wanted to see if I could come over on Saturday to see you in your prom dress." "Of course you can. I'm getting my hair done, but you can come after that. Maybe around 5:30? Tell your mom to call me first, just to make sure that I'm home." "Oh, it won't be my mom. It'll be Becky." Dead silence on the other end of the line. "Wait, what?" "Since you couldn't watch me, my mom found a girl named Becky to do it." Another long pause. "Okay, sweetie, that's fine." Jane hurriedly got me off the phone. I went to school the next day and came home to my mom hanging up the phone, shaking her head. Poor Jane. Her date doesn't want to take her anymore. They had a fight. She wanted to know if she could still watch you this Saturday. I feel bad canceling on Becky, but it's completely up to you. Of course, I chose Jane. And as usual, we had tons of fun. I didn't bring up the prom because I didn't want to make her sad. But then she asked me if I wanted to play dress up. We did each other's hair, and I put on my mom's dresses and took pictures with my mom's Polaroid. It was the best night of an 11-year-old's life. After this year, Jane went on to community college, and by the time she went off to a 4-year school, I no longer needed a babysitter. We kept in touch a little bit after that, but before long, we both got busy, and we lost touch. This is where the story ended, up until this past weekend. I ran into Jane at a bar. She was not sober. In fact, quite the opposite. Jane didn't seem to be doing so well. She was rail thin, and it looked like she had track marks on her arms. This made me extremely sad because she was one of the people I loved most in this world, at least at one time. I sat next to her at the bar and asked her how she was doing. Her face lit up, and she gave me a gigantic hug. I always knew you would do well for yourself. Look at you. You're all grown up and beautiful. Oh, you look great too, Jane. No, I don't, but it's okay. We started talking, and she was drinking even more. I got the feeling that she was in blackout territory. She was with a group of people that seemed to be her friends, so I wasn't entirely worried for her. But I still didn't want to leave her for some reason. She seemed really happy to see me. We started reminiscing, and once it was my turn to bring up a story, I said, "Remember when that dirtbag stood you up for prom? So we staged our own with pictures and everything? That was great." She looked at me through foggy eyes and smiled a tiny smile. "He didn't stand me up. That replacement babysitter was a sick fuck. She was my babysitter when I was young. She beat me, threatened me, locked me in closets, and did other terrible things to me too. Then, when she was done, she'd invite her boyfriend over to do those same things to me. She told me if I ever told anyone that she would kill my family, and I would have to go live in an orphanage. She took pictures of me too. This was something that I had pushed deep down until you said her name that day. Now it's all back. All of it. I should have told someone, but it's too late now. I just didn't want people to know what had happened to me. I thought they would look at me differently. Who knows what else she did?" That's when Jane set down her drink and gave me a hug. Then she said, "Good to see you," like she hadn't just dropped a major bomb on me. Then she stumbled out with her boyfriend. Everything came flooding back to me. The phone conversation with Becky with all the details. Jane's silence when I said Becky's name. How Jane stayed with me every single weekend until I was old enough to not need a babysitter. Some people might say Jane should have told someone, but she was just a kid herself, although an extraordinary one. She gave up her prom to save me. She gave up every single weekend after that so that nothing would ever happen to me. Jane was my guardian angel. Unfortunately, Jane didn't have her own Jane, and it makes me feel horrible. As a humanist, I try to look for opportunities to help my fellow human beings, to be a living example of kindness and compassion, hopefully leaving the world nicer than when I found it. But years ago, someone important to me said, there's a thin line between kindness and naivety. This is something that I learned the hard way. About 12 years ago, I was 24 years old. I'm female, and I was freshly single and living happily alone. I left work one night around 3 a.m., the joys of the service industry, and had just given a ride home to a coworker who closed along with me. It wasn't a bad part of town per se, but far from the greatest. Whatever, time to head home and get myself some sleep. Patiently waiting at a red light, streets are void of cars and people, when I notice a man and woman stumbling down the sidewalk to my right. The man knocks on my car window, and this makes me flinch. My car doesn't have electronic anything, and my window is already down an inch. But maybe they need help or something. Why else would they be staggering around at 3 a.m.? Her ankle is broken. She can't walk. The lady is kind of swaying just out of my view, moaning either in pain or inebriation. I frown at them. I can call someone if you like. Or there's a gas station over there. Maybe you could... But without hesitation, the guy opens my front passenger door, the one my coworker hadn't locked when she got out. The woman staggers into my car. It all happened so fast. I was stunned. Even more so when the guy squeezed in beside her. 2 people somehow fitting into the front seat of my Toyota Corolla. I was supremely conscious of the woman's leg pressing against my purse at her feet. Inside of it was my phone, Kindle, and wallet with all the hard-earned money I'd made the past 2 weeks of waiting tables. They reeked of alcohol, and their eyes had this glaze to them. It was now pretty obvious that they were high as fuck. The guy tells me, I need you to drive us to the Kroger. You mean the Walmart just up the street? Drive, whatever, just drive. Oh, okay, I stammered and complied. I didn't know if they were armed, and I didn't want to find out. The guy was drinking something out of a bottle in a brown paper bag, like a class act. What would they do if I refused? They were clearly in an altered state, unpredictable, dangerous. I didn't want to escalate, and I didn't want to provoke. I pressed my lips into a forced smile. I decided I would be as calm and as polite as I could manage, and maybe, just maybe, they'd have second thoughts about murdering someone so nice, or at least feel a little bad about it. They tried to engage me in conversation as we drove. The woman seemed about 40, leathery skin, and quite manic. She would rattle off schizophrenic nonsense 1 minute, and then become incredibly lucid and well-spoken on a complex topic for the next. Watching her go back and forth between the two states was absolutely surreal. She told me I didn't need to be scared. They weren't going to hurt me. They just needed a ride. I nodded, kept up that fake smile, while I continued to scream internally. The man seemed much older than she was, probably in his 60s, bald with wisps of white hair. Maybe it was her father or an uncle. He would only speak up to give turn-by-turn directions and would lose his shit at me if I so much as changed lanes unexpectedly. As the neighborhood deteriorated around us, I desperately scanned the roads for a police car on patrol. I'd call attention to myself somehow, run a red light, honk, swerve at them, anything to draw attention, and I'd be saved, and no such luck. My passengers were becoming increasingly agitated and paranoid as we neared our destination. I think they could sense my fear because the woman began to play with my hair and stroke my cheek. "Hey, don't be scared. I said we're not going to hurt you. You're such a nice girl," she cooed in my ear. "You're so nice, such a pretty girl. Holy sh..." The man just chuckled. I see the Kroger across the street. But no, they scream at me. Turn left, into the sketchiest apartment complex I've ever seen. My heart sank. This is how it ends, I thought. Or dead, maybe both. They have me idle in the parking lot and the guy gets out. "I'll be right back. Make sure she don't go nowhere. We got more stops after this." Oh, hell no. The woman stays with me in the car, and the guy disappears into one of the units. This is clearly a drug deal. I idly wonder if I'm guilty of a crime now, an accessory to something. I wonder if they're going to try to get me to come party with them later, or some other shit. Not going to happen. I knew if they got me out of my car, it'd be the beginning of the end. Once the man leaves, the woman spreads out in the passenger seat. At first, I think she's just making herself comfortable, until her legs part suggestively, and she begins to sexy slow dance in my 2008 Toyota Corolla to My Immortal. She looks over at me with her most lustful set of come-to-bed eyes. She bites her lip, and her hands travel up her thighs. She asks me, "You like what you see? Is this really happening? Did she just proposition me while sexy dancing to Evanescence?" As if this night couldn't get any more bizarre. Luckily, my poker face is fucking strong, and I suppress any reaction. I break into an apologetic smile. "Oh no, but thank you. I just don't swing that way." I hastily switch one of my everyday rings to my wedding finger and hold it up with a regretful smile. I'm married, you see, and my husband, he's expecting me home soon. Her seductive demeanor drops like a curtain, her face twisting with fury and indignation. What do you think I am? You think I'm some hooker? It wasn't like that. I didn't mean it like that." What the absolute fuck? "Oh, no. I didn't think that at all. I'm sorry. I'm just tired because I worked all day, and it's late." She stares at me hard, eyes wide and struggling to focus, until her face breaks into another wide manic smile. She slumps back into the seat, seemingly satisfied with my answer. and we share an uncomfortable silence. I knew I had to do something. No way was I going to see how this night played out with me and the two of them. My eyes dart to the unit that the man went into, and I lean over to the woman, my face a mask of concern. "Hey, he's been gone a long time. Do you think you should check on him? Just to make sure he's okay." Her eyes narrow suspiciously, and she gives me a wry smile. "You won't just drive away?" I summon every ounce of angelic calm and poured it into my voice. "Of course not." "You promise?" "Yeah," I said warmly. "I promise," dying just a little more inside. Imagine my surprise when it actually worked. I watch her get out of the car and close the door behind her. I fucking book it. Rubber screeching, heart pounding. It's dark, so I don't bother looking back. I try to leave the complex, but there's only one exit. The way we came in, which is right where I dropped them off. I pulled into a random parking spot several buildings away and turned off my car, ducking down into the seat and calling, well, I should have called the police then and there, but I didn't feel like I was out of the woods just yet. But I was safe-ish, and I called a friend and broke down in tears explaining everything over the phone. Once that initial burst of adrenaline wore off, I started my car back up. No sign of anyone watching the gate or looking for me. I make my getaway and arrive home safely about 30 minutes later. I called the police then, and an officer was sent over to take my statement. I didn't expect anything to come of it, but I wanted the event on record in case there was any form of retaliation. These people knew where I worked because of my uniform, which also had my name prominently displayed, as well as what car I drove. The officer asked where I ended up taking them, and from my vague description, he instantly knew the location. High crime area, a lot of drug-related incidents. Great. I still drive my 2008 Corolla, but I made a pledge to myself that night that my next car will definitely have electric locks. When I was 17, I needed to get a job. I was out of high school and living with my parents who were driving me up the walls. I knew I needed to get out. I was applying for jobs everywhere I could. I would walk into a store and immediately ask if they were hiring. I didn't exactly care where I worked. I just needed the money to get out of my current living situation. The local grocery store was having a mass hire job fair type deal on a specific day and time. I woke up early, got ready, and went in. Everyone looking to get a job had to stand in a line and wait to be interviewed. No big deal. I just fumbled around with my phone while I waited. The guy in front of me was standing sideways so he could easily face me and anyone else behind me. He continually asked me questions like, "Is this your first job? How old are you? How far would you have to drive to get to work here?" After that last one, I sarcastically told him I didn't know he was the person that was supposed to interview me. I thought he got the point because he stopped talking to me after that. We get up further in the line, and finally he's being interviewed in this little office. It was really just a setup of tall pieces of cardboard that gave the illusion of privacy during your interview. It was set up right in the front of the grocery store so anyone walking outside could see you doing your interview. I was actually getting nervous because I really wanted the job. When he got done and came out, he walks right up to me and says, "I hope you get the job, cutie. I'd love to see more of you." If it weren't for my own interview coming up moments from then, I probably would have told him to get lost. But anyway, I steady myself and make my way into that makeshift cubicle, office, whatever. The guy hands me some papers and tells me to fill them out. I do so and hand the packet right back to the man once I'm done. When I lifted my head up, I saw that behind the man interviewing me was the creep from the line, now standing outside the grocery store, watching me do my interview. I was reasonably anxious before, but now I was starting to worry about this creep. I try my best to make it through the interview without looking at the guy and answer the questions that I'm being asked, but occasional glances towards him rewarded me with witnessing this creep straight up groping the glass, having his hand down his pants, hopefully only acting like he was jerking off, before finally taking pictures of me with his phone. I was ready to call the cops as soon as I got out of there, if this guy was still around. When my interview was wrapping up, I was given some pamphlets and a gift card for a few bucks off groceries. I shook hands with the interviewer, said my goodbyes. When I looked back at the window, the creepy guy wasn't there any longer, and this feeling of relief washed over me completely. I went to leave the store, and I hoped to God that I hadn't fucked up my interview, thanks to that guy's distractions. I walked through the grocery store back to the door that I entered through, and shortly after walking outside, I saw him leaning up against the wall. He saw me. It was like he was waiting for me. I pulled out my keys and put them in between my knuckles like I was taught to do at a young age, and my other hand went straight into my pocket, holding my phone. I started walking towards my car, but unfortunately, my route was going to take me right past him. When it did, he stepped out to walk beside me. So, how'd it go? I didn't respond. I didn't say a thing to him. You're really too cute to be working at a grocery store, you know. You could make a lot more money without even having to leave your house if you just went online. This started to border on disgusting, but still I said nothing. Oh, so you're going to be like that? Not say anything to me? Probably a good idea, because if you open that mouth, I'd be tempted to stick my I cut him off. I cut him off by swinging around towards him and punching him in the throat with my key fist. Unfortunately, my grip on the keys weren't tight enough, and they fell out of my hand on impact. But it was enough to shut him up and get him choking. I snatched my keys off the ground and started running for my car. He was following me, shouting after me, calling me a bitch and other vulgarities that I don't remember. I got into my car and locked it just in time, right as he slammed his hands down on my driver's side window. I was shaking like crazy, but I got my phone out of my pocket, and after a few feeble attempts from my shaking hands, I correctly dialed 911. He was now pounding on my window with open fists, shouting about how I assaulted him, trying to open my doors, walking around the car to see if any of the other doors were unlocked. I tried my best to talk to the dispatcher and tell them where I was at. That's when he got back to my driver's side door and continued to pound on it while cussing at me. I held my phone up to the window so he could clearly see the number that I dialed and who I was on the phone with. On that note, his face went white and he looked around before casually walking off. I waited a bit before telling the dispatcher that I thought he was gone. They wouldn't want to send out a patrol car if he had left. The dispatcher got the description of the guy from me and told me they'd have someone come out and look at the grocery store camera footage, that they would talk to the guy who interviewed me to see if they could find out who the creep was. I never heard a thing about that guy ever again. Thankfully, to my knowledge, as this grocery store was one that I frequented, he didn't get the job. But unfortunately, neither did I. When I was in college, my dad came down to help me move into a new apartment complex. The new place was about 5 stories high, and each level had an identical layout with apartment units along indoor hallways, which were accessed from an elevator to the parking garage down below. I was the last one of my 3 roommates to move into the new place, so there was already some furniture and decor with which I wasn't familiar. This is relevant, I swear. Dad and I were unloading the truck from the garage below, so we would take the elevator to my place on the 5th floor with each load. As we carried my big mattress into the apartment, I had to set it down for a moment to readjust my grip before we went through the door to my new bedroom. That's when I actually looked at my surroundings and thought, I don't recognize that couch. And where did that half-empty bottle of Jack Daniels on the counter come from? Right then, I also remembered that nobody else was home, but I could hear the shower turning off and a man's voice timidly say, "Hello?" from the bathroom. As it dawned on us both that we were in the wrong unit, my dad just shouts, "Abort! Abort!" before he grabs his end of the mattress and shoves me and the bed back out into the hallway. We realized that we had gotten off on the wrong floor and gone into the unit directly below mine. Luckily, we made it back to my floor before the poor guy from the shower ever saw us. Well, fast forward a couple of months, and I had kind of forgotten about this whole event. One of my roommates had gotten to know the guys in the unit below us, and they would sometimes come up to our place to smoke our weed. One night, we were all hanging out in the living room with Andrew, one of the downstairs dudes, and it came up in conversation that we liked the great security in our building because this was a bigger city than any of us were used to. Andrew agreed, in general, but he then told us about this one time he totally freaked out because when he was in the shower, he swore he heard multiple people in his apartment thumping around and talking to each other right outside of the bathroom door. He had always wondered if he had hallucinated the whole thing because when he emerged from the bathroom, nothing was stolen and there was nobody there. At that point, I was trying to blend into the terrible 1980s wallpaper as my face turned bright red. My roommates all knew and loved the story of my dad and I breaking into the downstairs neighbor's apartment and then running away like total creeps. Of course, one of my girls doesn't miss a beat and said, "Oh yeah, that was just Stephanie and her dad trying to move her mattress into your bedroom." After I explained the whole situation, Andrew said he was ultimately relieved to learn it wasn't someone with malicious intent. But I never was able to shake my new nickname, Creeperess. So there you have it. My story of how my dad and I were inadvertently the local sketchballs. Hope you enjoyed it.